razzle dazzle, we're the best. No, the courts aren't on your side, but they're not on the tenant side either.
Jen!
Like, you are independently wealthy when you are naked.
I am over treating property management the same as real estate sales.
I guess I'll lead the witness. I think it's freaking scammy. Welcome to Hold It with PM Jen, the show for real estate investors who buy and hold forever and ever. Amen. Welcome to Hold It with PM Jen, the show for investors who buy and hold forever and ever. Amen. As usual, our very first segment is called Hold the Phone, where we get to introduce our guest. And today's guest is very exciting. He is newlywed Denny Hummer, the Assistant Director of the Bucknell SBDC. That stands for Small Business Development Center. But he's also the go-to guy for anyone in Danville seeking wisdom on real estate and business. Known as the Muffin Man, he has decades of hands-on experience in building, branding, and boosting businesses. From custom home building to investing in entrepreneurial adventures, Denny is all about making connections and empowering others, all while still keeping that beautiful smile on that face. Denny, welcome to the show. Can't wait to hear some of your stories.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Wonderful. So first, tell us, you were recently married and you're repatriating to Europe, according to Facebook.
It sometimes seems that way. We
Yeah.
we love a few great countries over there, and but thank you for the well wishes.
Yeah, I am wishing you well. I hope you stay here in the U.S. and you don't take off.
I promise we're not going anywhere.
So, you know, people don't know what SBDCs are, so I'd love to just know, what is an SBDC, and then, like, what attracted you to Bucknell's SBDC?
Sure. The SBDC, as you said, the Small Business Development Center, is a group of institutions that are housed at universities across the United States. And I happen to work for one of the very first ones in the country. So
No way.
the Bucknell Small Business Development Center started 46 years ago, and it actually predated the national program. So we are a group of consultants that are working to be assistants to entrepreneurs like yourself, looking to grow, start their business, and looking for resources. So like I said, we're housed in educational institutions. There happen to be 15 in Pennsylvania, and we're divided up geographically. So we provide services to the whole state, and beyond that, each state has their own SBDCs. I think it totals nearly 1,000 across the
Wow.
United States.
So who's paying for all that? Where's the money come from?
Well, that's a great question. So obviously, the federal government is the major player here. The Small Business Administration is our primary funding source, followed up by the state of Pennsylvania through the Department of Community and Economic Development.
Okay.
And of
So
course,
state and federal funding.
state and federal funding, and of course, Bucknell University, that recognizes the opportunity to host a center like this gives valuable experience to students to work in our program and get an experience beyond the classroom.
So also sponsored then by the institution.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then do your clients, the small businesses, have an expense?
No, and that's the great thing about our program. So there's no cost to our entrepreneurs that we work with. And even more importantly than the no cost is the fact that everything we do is done confidentially. And we all sign, so like this semester, we have 21 students working in our program. They're all paid consultants, all have signed confidentiality agreements and made a pledge that everything they do and all the clients they work with they're going to hold all that information, and we protect that. And I think we've done a really good job, 46 years working with an incredible amount of clients. So it's been amazing.
Yeah, I've been involved. I mean, if you've gone to a school that has one of those and you're in the business program, and I went to IUP, which was houses the SBDC for that region. I was a student consultant, and I'd forgotten that by the time I became an entrepreneur. And we'll talk about how I got connected with you in the SBDC. So you say Bucknell's has a very long history that goes beyond the federal programs. Is that what attracted you to it? Like, why? Because, well, tell us a little bit. You've been a home builder, you've had restaurants, you've done all kinds of entrepreneurial things. Why are you at an SBDC? Why are you a company man with a logo on your chest?
I love it. It's kind of a fascinating story, and I look at it from the fact that I've had a very rich career, and I've enjoyed many different things. I use the term serial entrepreneur. I wear that with pride. I'm always afraid to not reinvent myself every 7 years or so. And I think that over the years, I've had some great fortune in different industries. Like you said, my real first sale was a box of strawberries that my dad talked me into selling because he wouldn't pay for a pair of Nike sneakers that I wanted. But he said, we're a kids family. He says, if you want Nike, here's the difference in price. Go make some money. And I blame him, and God rest his soul, but he did. He instilled some incredible wisdom about we have opportunity.
Yeah.
And that opportunity can come in many different packages. And how do we explore that? How do we tap inside?
Yeah.
And not everybody is an entrepreneur.
Right.
And I think what happened is I've spent all these years doing all these different things. I'm still involved in many things. But then I found out about this program and I was like, oh my gosh, there's like a self-help group out there for entrepreneurs. And everybody thinks that when I went there almost a little over 12 years ago, that they built this job just for me. And it's not true, even though it does appear that way. It's really a great opportunity for me now to give back. I've been fortunate and I've had some great years, and now it's time to watch others. And so like I told you, I live vicariously through your success now.
Right.
And it's really fun to watch us be able to provide an educational resource to help entrepreneurs put new tools in their toolbox and go out and do something with it.
We blame our parents too for our path. They demonstrated to us that you don't have to retire doing the same job you started, and our parents have reinvented themselves time and time again. That was kind of the theme of an article that was written about our family this summer in the Boom magazine. Was they demonstrated for us what it was like to change and change and change. And I've made wholesale life changes. This is probably early evidence of a wholesale life change for Jen. Mm-hmm. So we really identify with that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to talk to you today because you're lifelong in Danville, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, and you're responsible now for helping facilitate this innovation, development, economic development in the region. And this region is hot. I get calls about it all the time. So specifically in regards to the incubators, the two that you've helped start, Startup Lewisburg and Startup Danville, how has working with them changed your perspective on innovation in business in our market? Because when we think about innovation in business, we think about big innovation, what Elon Musk is doing and stuff like that. And that's fine, great, wonderful. But there's really cool stuff happening here. And I'm just interested on your take on that since you're on the front line.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And really what it comes down to is meeting entrepreneurs where they're at and not trying to put them into a space or a box that doesn't fit. And one of the things I discovered early on is that we all bring accidental biases to the table. And sometimes we think that we are going to apply what our definition of their success is, when in reality, we need to talk to them about what their definition of success is. And so as I started to get outside of my own head, because I realized I was as guilty as anyone in doing that, I started to realize that, not everybody fits into every space. But one of the things I did discover is that geographically, there was a need for entrepreneurs to have a space to test their ideas. Okay. And so when I came to Bucknell, they already had the Startup Lewisburg. The incubator was already there. For lack of a better, it probably was not being used at its highest level that it could be. Okay. It was only a year or so old when I got there, and I didn't even know what an incubator was back then. So, and they put me, my office was in that space. I was scared to death because really was nobody there. And I was like, oh my God, they just hired an extrovert. I'm going to die so quickly. I'm not.
They just put you alone in there with
They put me alone.
Else?
And so then I found out, oh, this is what an incubator does. And I was like, oh, well, let's fill this thing up. And so I filled it up with all my people and they became my friends. And it was fun to watch them navigate their journeys from different spaces. But one of the things that happened is the reality that it wasn't just me. I was just one piece of this. Entrepreneurs interacting with entrepreneurs creates this magic. And I coined the expression networking by collision a long time ago. Yeah. And really that's what it is. It's like sometimes we just have to bang into another person and look at, what's their experience and oh God, I just learned something. I'm glad I'm not going to make that mistake. And
Yeah.
what are the things that we can take out of that? So that's how the incubator program kind of evolved. The biggest thing that happened, we were looking at our data. We're big data freaks, and we save all kinds of information in our client resource tools. And one of the things that we figured out was we were calling ourselves a regional incubator. And I went back, we looked for like 4 or 5 years of data and realized that 92% of all of our entrepreneurs came from within 5 miles. So I went to my boss and I said, hey, guess what? We're really not a regional incubator. And to his benefit, he said, hey, what do you want to do about it? I was like, well, I kind of like to put one over in Danville. Now, that was a little self-serving because I live on a family farm that's been in my family 165 years. And I'm thinking I could have an office space that's even closer than Lewisburg.
Yeah.
And so the neat thing was he says, well, if you know what, let's go find some funding, figure out how we can do this, and see if you can replicate what's happening in Lewisburg. And that's what we did. And
We really did.
And we did. And the neat thing is we just opened Startup Milton. So now we have 3 incubators and more on the horizon, because one of the amazing things that happened is that we recognized that we want to bring our services to the community and not expect the community just to pick up and come to us.
Right.
And I think that's what you're doing. And I think that's really our, story as far as how you and I met.
Yeah, it really is. And we'll get into that. And I don't have planned for today, but it is an incredible story, a real estate story, what you did with that drive center in Danville.
Yeah.
Just what's the headline? It was underutilized brownfield?
Yeah. So what happened is there was a company that had occupied the space. It was an engineering firm, foreign owned, and they were combining facilities. So they just up and left Danville and moved it to York. And this property, which I think was about 17 acres, was just kind of like they didn't know what to do with it. So some of the great leadership in Danville, the early economic development parties, got them to the table and said, if for a very small price, why don't you mostly donate this to Drive, which is Danville's economic development engine. Well, not just Danville. Drive is a 5-county economic development engine that works to not let properties like that sit. And so we carved it all up. I happened to be the chair of the board at the time. We started carving the property up. And of course, I talked them into letting me put an incubator in there. And it was great. And so really what's happening is we recognize that entrepreneurs need a physical space to test their idea, a launch pad, whatever you want to call it, but really to be able to put people under one roof that share common goals as far as growing a business.
That's awesome. Well, you've heard it 1,000 times. Your network is your net worth. But what are you actually doing about it? See, the most successful people I know dedicate time and money to growing and strengthening their networks. And I don't mean by joining Facebook groups and posting that you're looking for deals. Here's a tip: that doesn't work. You have to be in person with people who share your interests and be willing to help each other. At the Williamsport Area Real Estate Investors Meetup, the largest in the region, we do just that. We're focused on making sure you meet people that help you achieve your goals. This isn't one of those events where speakers pitch you their overpriced courses or books. Nope. We bring in legit experts to drop actual value, and it's totally free. For now, but don't hold me to that forever, because this is too good and the room only holds so many. Get the dates, times, and speaker lineup at holditwithpmgen.com. That's holditwithpmgen.com, and I will see you there. Well, our next segment, hold up, what's next? And it's why I have Denny here. Jesse and I are really personally, in business, very interested in the Danville Lewisburg market. So we met several years ago when we planted our office down there. It's been over 3 years now. And I get calls from investors interested in Danville and Lewisburg every week. And that's fantastic. How would you describe the local economic outlook for that potential real estate investor, that investor like you who wants to own those small multifamilies or single families? What should they be thinking about in Danville, Lewisburg, and what's going on there?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think I'm passionate, and I have to sometimes temper my emotion and put my business hat on and look at it from an economic standpoint. And so knowing the community my whole life, and understanding how people operate and people think. The most magical thing is the fact that we have a major employer in our community that is literally an engine that is operating incredibly and growing. And we were having the conversation earlier today about 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐷, and let's just call them out for their amazing commitment to our community. And, I don't want to go into a long detailed story, but the reality of it is Danville, like any of the fellow communities in the region, was destined to possibly become economic ruin because it was originally an iron town. Yeah. If you go back to the 1840s and things are cranking, and all of a sudden steel came along, and Bethlehem, Pittsburgh, they're going to be the big steel boom, and iron, nothing.
Yeah.
But it took some vision, and it took, the unfortunate passing of George 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫, his widow, Abigail, took her money, and it was quite a bit. And she said, you know what, I think I'd like a hospital. So we were able to pivot. And I think, so that resiliency, that ability to look at is still alive and well today. That hospital system, I think it's 30-some thousand employees.
Right.
In March of this year, or May, I forget which month exactly, they just broke ground on a new behavioral health hospital, 96 beds. They're changing the whole front of the main institution there in town, and investing $880 million, almost $1 billion, in a town of 4,500 in a county of 18,000.
Right.
So that's what's
wonderful.
happening in our community.
And it's more than a hospital, right? It's a center of, is it research and things like that
Absolutely.
are happening there?
It's a teaching hospital. They actually have a medical school that's attached with it now. It's an inclusive healthcare program, and I think pretty amazing that we have that in our community.
I think, though, when I get these calls, the vision is that's 30,000 doctors and nurses all making over $150,000 a year renting.
No.
Can you talk about 30,000 people? And then, of course, that's just 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫. That generates a lot of economic activity. So what else are they spurning off, and what are we seeing? Are we seeing researchers? Are we seeing more business people? A lot of business people have to work there.
Absolutely. I think one of the things you got to look at is as a complete ecosystem, and it isn't just doctors, but it isn't just researchers. It's the people that are mowing the grass out front, and it's the people that are checking in patients, and all of the different connections that are made, and all of that coming from, they don't all live in Danville, so this whole region is completely strengthened by the vision of a woman over 100 years ago that said she wanted to make a difference.
That's incredible. So besides healthcare and 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫, do you have your eye on anything else going on in this region that if I'm an investor, I should go, that's a reason or something might be happening here?
Well, you know what? I'm going to go to the big three because I think this is a great question.
Okay.
And housing is number one.
Okay.
And of course, that's your business. And I think, these people have to live somewhere. And they want to live in a great community. They want to be a part of it.
How's the housing supply in Danville Lewisburg? Are we super short, or?
I think you've seen a lot of growth in that over the last several years. I think there's been some wise investors to try to build some new facilities and some things of that nature. But I think it's still a little bit on the short side as it goes.
But in terms of construction in my market area, the only new construction that's happening is in Danville.
Yeah.
The only in terms of housing.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So from the housing side, absolutely. But these people have to eat. And you know what? There's always room for restaurants. And I think back, I sold my restaurant 20 years ago, but the reality of it is, diversity, coming up with great different options. These people want to eat. And most importantly, they want to play. Yeah. So I would be focusing on any of those three industries right now if I'm looking at growth.
Got it.
And if you can do mixed use in your properties.
Yeah.
I think it's going to make it convenient. I think we've seen a couple that were built recently that I think were originally advertised as over 55 communities, swimming pool, health center. That's cute, but you know what? So the people working are interested in things like that because, with our students at Bucknell, I interview them all the time on their buying habits and why do they make decisions. And they're not really 100% interested in owning a house, at least in their mindset today.
Right.
Yeah, we hear that a lot from folks that we know in healthcare recruiting and healthcare retention. And, they have to recruit and retain their talent from the people mowing the lawn all the way up to the chief physicians. And how do they get these folks to come to this region? And you have to imagine that it can be a really tough sell for some of these very talented, educated, accomplished folks to come from these major metros to our semi-suburban, even rural area and say, what does this place have to offer me and my family? And from the housing perspective, can we even get housing of the same quality, of the same standards, on the same tenant beneficial terms that we can in these other areas where we have options? And these people have options. And why are they choosing our region? And so I agree. They have to put a roof over their head. They have to put food on their table or feed their family every day. And they have to have a quality of life that keeps them here.
Yeah.
And that is the uphill battle for these large employers in healthcare, in higher education, in major industries in this area. That is the battle. And we see those people in recruitment hyper focused on that and invested in that development because they have the job for the person.
I don't think the statistics are out completely, but I think as we go back and analyze what happened because of the pandemic, it changed mindsets. It changed, I don't want to live in a big city. I don't want to be victim to this, having, not being trapped. And so people started to kind of focus on rural America again. And I think, when we're going to go back and look at this, I predict that we're going to see that it was actually helpful because we were struggling to recruit people. Nobody wanted to come live in the middle of nowhere and not, be able to get the resources they're used to. And then all of a sudden people said, I kind of want to live in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to only enhance.
I kind of want to live in a place that has shown some resiliency to major changes, unlike some major metros that just aren't as resilient and can be very just overly responsive to major shifts.
Small communities feel safer because the reactions come off smaller to those big triggers. Right. And that's interesting that you talk about that, about the eating and the playing and the recreation and it being to a different standard for these people who are relocating to our area for these jobs. And I think about it in housing as we've got to elevate our old housing stock because it is difficult if you lived in a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, central air, 2-car attached garage in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Yeah. And it's time to move to Danville for you moving from Hershey Medical System to 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿, maybe, right? We've seen that story. And they come and they call us and they call the leasing agent and go, this is what I'm looking for. And they have to go, okay, let's just reorient here. What are we going to get for you? And so I hear you on that. I'm interested though, when I moved to Danville, I brought my office to Danville 3 years ago. The big project that was happening then was Green Thumb Industries, GTI, which is in the exciting new world of cannabis. So that's an exciting project. That had some scale and investment. Why do you have any idea why Danville was a great match for that? And what's the deal with that facility? You might know some of the basics about it.
Sure. So that was originally the location where TRW came. And so they were a valve and airfoil manufacturing facility. And they made all the fins that went into the jet turbine engines back in the day. Okay. And I know that my uncle worked there polishing, blades his whole entire career, which I can't even begin to imagine, a repetitive nature for 40 years doing that. But he did it because he was committed to his family and he made a good living and they did that. But you know what? It changed. And once again, we're faced with this amazing big facility right in town with rail service nearby and literally across the street from the drive facility. And what do we do with that? And so some good visionaries, the original investors in GTI had some ties to the area and said, I want to build something here. And luckily we had economic development minded elected officials that said, you know what, we're not going to stand in the way of this because it's going to bring a lot of good paying jobs.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's like any other business. So like if you and I were talking about, what makes a good solid business, it's called diversified revenue streams. we can't put all our eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
And a community can't afford to do that either.
It's like the only new money in agriculture.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's the only new money in agriculture. And yeah, you're right. You had to have some very progressive local officials who were willing to have, is it 5 stories? A 5-story gray metal box full of weed in the middle of town. Yeah. And it doesn't not smell like it as someone who goes to drive. And it's fine. It's not a problem. Any other projects like that going on right now that you would just call out? Anything else that you're aware of?
I think there's a lot of other pieces in play, and I call out 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿𝐻 because I'm proud of what they've done for our community, but there's so many more. There's the people like Boyd Station, the cottoners that are over there, that they put in this entire processing facility for soybeans and sunflowers, and they're bringing commodities in by the train car and turning it into sunflower oil and to soybean oil. And some of it's organic, and they're serving the world with their product, and it's happening right there in our community.
Yeah.
And it's a multi-million-dollar operation. This isn't just a little farmer that's planting a couple acres. These people are committed to building an economy with their products, and it's incredible.
That's really awesome.
Is real estate investment just so much harder than you thought? I know it seems unfair, but, and I say this with love, that's what the money's for. Taking the risk and figuring out the problems. And if you do it well, you are handsomely rewarded. Lucky for you, I've got 2 new events lined up that will change the game for you. First up, Deal Tours. Imagine spending an entire day with me, walking through multifamily properties available for sale, off market of course, breaking down the numbers and figuring out how to stabilize and add value like a pro. I am making that dream a reality, and whether you're actively buying or just sharpening your skills, this is where real investors learn to win. First one is in spring 2025. And this fall, the Buy Better, Hold Better Summit. 1 day, top-tier education, industry experts with experience in the North Central PA market who actually know what they're talking about, and the connections you need to make your investment success possible. Think of it as a masterclass in buy and hold real estate. Additionally, the room is full of people doing the same thing as you, so you can build that network with little effort. Don't forget, for the 4th year in a row, we are hosting our Williamsport area real estate investor meetups every other month in Linden. Want the inside track? Of course you do. Go to holditwithpmgen.com and register for event updates. And while you're at it, follow me, Hold It with PM Gen, on Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Helping real people grow real wealth with real estate.
We talked about healthcare, but we also look at like aging in place, and so I'll call out like St. Cyril's and the sisters that have built that whole entire community around providing
Like in-home care?
In-home care and also in-facility care, and the Meadows. And they built these homes that people can transition, so they get rid of their big 2-story, transition to a 1-story. I forget, I looked a couple of years ago. They were like the 2nd or 3rd highest employer in the county.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
And they're building economies, so those are the kind of things. And then I don't want to ignore the little guy downtown, in the small shops and the mom and pops that's what makes things happen. Because if you don't have a vibrant downtown and a place to go grab a beer and somewhere to just enjoy the space you live,
you'll go enjoy your time somewhere else.
Yeah. You'll
spend your money somewhere else.
Right. You'll find somewhere else to go. And so I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, recognizing an opportunity, filling a void, and for me, building relationships, because everything comes down to, caring about people. And I think that's what makes me tick. I care about people, and I want to see them grow and succeed. And
yeah. I just had this thought, this realization that I forgot to introduce Jessie Rulins, and she's been talking, and people are probably like, who is that person?
And I referenced our parents. Who could I possibly be?
Who could you be?
Denny, are you my brother?
Well, you never know.
We should do a 23andMe.
Check 23andMe.
Well, this fine lady is Jessie Rulins, my sister and director of operations at One Focus Property Management. And I want to make sure to introduce her because I want to talk next in my next segment called Hold Your Risk. And I'm obsessed with risk. That, and as long-term buy and hold investors, long-term buy and hold property managers, risk is that thing, right, that we are controlling for. We're always trying to identify it and mitigate it. Identify, mitigate. And we did. So anyway, I met you, like 3.5 years ago when I said, hey, I want to be down in Danville Lewisburg area. Somehow I got an introduction to you pretty quickly. And really,
someone said, are you talking to Denny? And we're like, who's Denny?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, that's where you need to start and where you probably need to end too. And here we are.
So we got that introduction from a nice soul to Denny, and that opened up several key connections for me, people, which is your number one thing. You are a connector. I got my office planted in the incubator there at Drive. So now I have this supported entrepreneurial space to kind of launch that market from. And then I got into the SBDC at Bucknell. See, being in Williamsport, our SBDC that serves us geographically is in Penn State, which is just kind of far. And they didn't have anybody. And one thing SBDCs are terrible at, tell your bosses, is advertising and finding those people. You guys do it really well. I think that's probably one of your really big skill sets. I know they don't give you any money for it. I know. There's no money in the federal money to tell about the programs.
We're actually not allowed to use our money that way. And so, but I have a big mouth, so I look for free ways to get our word out without...
Well, and what would a property management company do with an SBDC, right? And we wanted to do some research and development, and I wanted to share a little bit and get Jesse's take on some of the findings. I was obsessed with our data. We do a really great job of collecting data, but not analyzing data. Mm-hmm. And we knew over 12 years in the business and always having this huge portfolio of many hundred doors, we knew a lot of things about people before they moved in. We take their rental application, we know their credit score, where they're coming from, landlord history, income, the whole thing. And if we rent to them, we also know the move out outcomes. So we know of the people that we deemed creditworthy, given those facts, how did they perform? I was like, well, wouldn't that be amazing if we could start to look at and I'll call it an algorithm. It's really not an algorithm. That would be disingenuous.
That would be more advanced than we are.
It's a scoring matrix is how we make our application decisions, but we weight different factors as we see fit in that standard that we apply universally. So anyway, we said, well, which of these move-in factors most determine move-out outcomes? And before we get started, you assigned us some student consultants in the data science department. So we got to work, and they were supported by their professors. So it's not like I'm just working with a college sophomore who's had like half of a data science class. I'm working, and I was really impressed with the quality of the students I got to work with. And they're, of course, supported by professors and professional consultants at the SBDC. So anyway, we got this project going. And Jesse, how hard was it getting the data together?
Well, when you have a room full of kittens, and then you have a box, and your job is to put all the kittens in the box. It seems straightforward. We got all the data, we collected it, we stored it, but then getting it all into a database was an overwhelming task for our staff who are incredible at property management and reducing risk for property owners and improving the lives of tenants and all those things. We are terrible at developing databases. You heard it here first. Do not hire us to do this. That was our first overwhelming thing to do, to take all these years of data, all the data that we collected from the applications and from the results, and get it into a format that professionals could work with.
Yeah, because our data is noisy. It's not universal. It might have been calculated different on this one, so you have to calculate it the same and standardids it, and that was a challenge.
Right, and this person had W-2 income, and this person had 1099 income, and this person qualified on assets or their dividends from their everyone's a special, unique snowflake as an applicant, and so that was our first major hurdle, was developing a system to streamline our data into something useful by these data scientists.
Yeah, and to be fair, they were willing to help us with that we were unwilling to open up despite the confidentiality agreements. We said, no, we'll give you the data. We'll compile it and then we'll give it to you. And so we chose to do that in terms of division of labor. Once we handed over the data, though, they took it and they worked it and they were able to draw some conclusions, which I was so delighted in. And drumroll, what is the biggest move-in factor? So that would be rent, like rent to income ratio, credit score, landlord history, criminal history. We also looked at whether they were relocating. How much was the rent? How big was the house they were looking at, right? Because some people think if it's bigger and more expensive, then clearly the person who says they're interested is more qualified. I don't know how that works, because unqualified people want expensive things all the time that they can't afford.
Maybe more importantly, what wasn't it based on?
Oh, what do you mean? Like it wasn't based on any factors we don't use? What do you mean? Like
the protected classes, whether or not they had children, what their backgrounds were, what color they were, what religion where they were, and those things, especially in this region, that are just a little more archaic in their thinking and developing their thoughts on what represents risk.
Yeah.
It wasn't based on that.
No.
We don't collect it.
Well, yeah, we don't have that info.
Track it. We don't know it in a lot of cases. Yeah. Are you asking me for the answer?
No. But the biggest.
Do you want him to guess?
Denny, what was do you know? Because you were in the presentation, but you forget.
I was, but I'm embarrassed to admit that it was a little while ago.
Okay.
What was the final outcome?
Jesse?
It was their credit score.
Which blew my property manager mind. Yeah. Because I came up in this business taught that the credit score was developed by the mortgage companies.
Yeah.
And why I thought that was so different from rent. But I was taught when you look at a credit report, you were to eliminate medical and student debts. That was really common to do. And then look at negative versus positive trades and kind of make an assessment. I think those FICO score people are onto something.
Yeah.
And we're not saying that the credit scoring system is without fault. It's not our expertise. And as with anything, heaven knows there's probably room for improvement there. But we have proven, against our suspicion, but we have proven that it is actually the best indicator we have of success as a tenant with us.
And I think it's because it's probably the most clean piece of data in that application. The credit report is clean. Landlord history was always what I was taught to give the most weight to. And because we're most often calling, like you might have a tenant who's moved on and I'm calling Denny in the middle of his day to do something that gives him no value, right?
Right.
And he's also probably worried about the risk of something that he might say. Well, that just clouds whatever information you gave me. And of course, there's another human being hearing it, documenting it, where the credit score is numbers and bits and bytes. And so we, as a result of that research project with the SBDC, which we paid $0 for, aside from the time we spent engaging, of course, in the project, which we should have, we learned that credit score was the most determining factor. And we, as a result, did not eliminate the other factors. We just more strongly weighted credit score. And now we need a higher credit score than we used to. And we view that as the most important determinant. And it's only improved the performance of the portfolio.
Wow.
Because I'm obsessed with what you have control over, right? There's three kinds of risk in real estate: market risk, asset risk, and tenant risk. Market risk, jobs, economy, inflation. We know what it is, but I don't know about you, but I don't control it, right? I don't control it. Asset, is the roof going to blow off, the boiler go out? Okay, well, I get an inspection before I buy it and I maintain it preventatively, right? And I carry insurance. Great, mitigated that. Tenant risk, the only risk I have 100% control over, right? I decide who I rent to and under what terms every time. So really, when you look at the life of the real estate investor who's in the residential real estate space, what do you really control? I control who I say yes to and on what terms. And then I'm on a lease with them for a year. I can enforce to that lease and that agreement. And then when renewal time comes up, how do I handle that renewal? So we at One Focus really feel like we've gotten that initial tenant selection decision down. It's really good. It's really strong and it's got great performance. You know what's better than building generational wealth? Not a damn thing. And obviously the best way to do that is through buy and hold real estate. But let's be real, managing your properties yourself, that's a one-way ticket to burnout. This is supposed to be an investment, not a burden. At One Focus Property Management, we don't just manage your properties,
We make buy and hold real estate actually work. We handle everything: tenant screening, maintenance, rent collection, you name it. All you do is watch your portfolio and net worth grow. We make sure you never even think about quitting real estate investing, because the secret to buy and hold is to hold it for a very long time. And you can't do that when you sell every time you have a problem. We're the biggest, baddest property management team in Lycoming, Clinton, Northumberland, Montour, and Columbia counties. And we do it all to give you more protection, less work, and absolutely no drama. So let's turn your rental properties into wealth building machines. Learn more at onefocus.pm.com. That's onefocus.pm.com.
We've been, since your project, working on the renewal decision and putting some more data into that to make sure that we're not, because typically these things are done in companies, the head of the department sits down with a report and goes, oh, here's my 20 this month. And they go piece by piece, and they know their tenants, they know their history. And I think we're getting too much bias in that decision at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that project, and I thank you for that feedback, because I think, and I thank you for giving our students an opportunity to explore projects beyond the classroom like that. I remember Leah when she worked on that, and Dr. Chen, who was her advisor in data analytics, they're looking for real world application. But I mean, I'm going to put the credit back to you, because so often many companies have no clue about their data, and they don't want to be bothered with it. And really they can't live without it, because the world is forever changing. And I guarantee you, with the advent of artificial intelligence and everything that's happening today, we are going to be operating completely differently within 3 years or less.
Yeah. AI doesn't work unless you have data.
Yeah.
And you have to be the type of business owner or operator that is willing to pivot based on the results. And that is a unique factor to One Focus Property Management, is we were willing to see the results for what they were and make business decisions based upon that. There are a lot of business owners and operators out there who aren't willing to do anything different based on data. There are politicians like that. Like, the data isn't useful. So why would they track it? Why would they capture it? Why would they develop data storage sources when they maybe they know, or maybe they don't know, that they're not actually willing to do anything different based on the results. And that is what sets us apart from it too, that when Jen said, hey, this is something I want to do, we all got behind Jen as our visionary with that, because we knew that when we got the results that we would do something with those, and therefore it made it worth it to us. And I'm sure that's the first battle your data scientist students and professors fight. That's the first uphill battle they have to go through, is finding those business owners and operators who are willing to use the data.
Right.
And maybe especially in our region.
Absolutely. And I think there's a couple different users of data out there. There's the ones that think it's cool to track all that, but are scared to death for what they might learn from it. And then there's you that are progressive, that recognize that, you know what, we've got this data, let's learn from it, and let's be a better company because of it. And it's only going to get better. I mean, it's truly amazing. I can tell you the SBDC's all in on AI. I just did some training in Atlanta. Google is 100% trying to make sure we've got tools and everything for our
And that's what
entrepreneurs.
helps small business keep up in this world. Because little guys like me look at the big guys and go, of course they can afford all these tools that make their people so much more efficient, and everything runs so much smoother and cheaper, and I can't compete with that. But I can if I'm making use of the federally and state and university funded SBDC. Well, we're getting ready to wrap up here with our last segment, and it's my favorite. It's Hold My Drink. This is cocktail party stories from the fray, from the fronts. And I love construction because nothing is wilder, more out of check, out of bounds, and with huge consequence than construction. And you were a luxury home builder, right?
Correct.
All right. And they're all still standing. We didn't get out of it because they fell down? Okay. All right. I'd love to know a wild story about a project or something that, you know, would give my real estate investors a glimpse into what it's like to be doing that?
Yeah, I thought a little bit about this, and there are 1,000 stories that could be told. I mean, and I was very fortunate to have some incredible mentors in this space. And I'll never forget, and this one's kind of more of a little bit of a pointing back at me and my own bias that we talked about a little bit ago. I remember thinking, you know, and this is, you know, so I started back in the mid-90s, so it's been a while.
The 1900s. Wow.
Wow. But anyway.
So old.
We mentioned that 46-year-old small business development center, and that's before our time. So that is pretty old, Denny.
I know. So anyway. I'm not going to go there, but thank you for the segue.
I wonder if I ran into you when I was in the 3rd grade in the mid-90s.
But anyway, here's the story. I had this bias that I didn't realize was a bias, that nobody in our region here where I built would ever build a house over $1 million. And it was just one of those things. Everybody talked a good game, and we built some really big houses, but I always had this like mental block that nobody would ever spend that kind of money on a house.
How much were the houses you were building on average? Give me.
Well, they were, you know, $500,000 plus, you know, but it was just like $1 million was like this threshold that I didn't think I'd ever cross. It just seemed like such a ridiculous amount of money for a house. And then one day my boss calls me up, the owner of the company, and we were based out of Camp Hill. I was the division manager, and he says, hey, there's a couple that reached out. They had their blueprints drawn from a great architect in Atlanta. We want you to take a look at it. So I get the blueprints, we go through. He priced it, I priced it. We were within a couple $100 of each other, and I broke the $1 million mark on this. And I was like, oh crap, they're never going to build this house. I was like, this is just not going to happen. And so I told him, he goes, well, go meet with them, see what happens. And so we did it. We met in their home. I took the blueprints and I priced it all out, and we sat down and so in my mind, my little story is running, and I keep thinking, oh, this is a waste of my time. Laid it all out. I said, you know what? I respect you. I respect your time, and I don't want to be disingenuous here, but I really want to talk about the fact that, you know, I think this is where we're going to be on this project. And if you think that we're out of line on that, let me know. And it was like the worst thing I could ever say, because I was like, oh my God, these people are going to like totally walk away. And they said, no, we figured that's where we're going to be at. Sounds like we should open a bottle of wine and get this thing going. And as a salesperson, I walked out of there completely changed because of two individuals that totally looked at buying and building a new home differently than I had built in that model in my head. And I went on to build several houses over $1 million. And I was thinking, you know what? So my challenge from that story is to figure out what biases do you accidentally bring to the table, and are they limiting you in the growth of your company?
Yeah.
Because I was limiting the growth of our own company just because of the fact that I was predicting what somebody else was thinking, and I was way wrong.
I think you're right. I definitely, and doing new things like this web podcast thing I'm doing, what am I doing, right? And you know, that uncertainty, but I have a real F around and find out kind of approach to life, and we're going to throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks and not be embarrassed. Jesse, any construction wild stories? Maybe something a little wilder than selling $1 million homes like a real sales champ.
Teddy's not really bringing the juice to
I was going to say, there was not one turd or nude person or anything in that story.
I know. That... Denny,
I'm sorry.
You can do better.
Jesse,
I know you can.
Pick this back up. Tell us a good one.
Change the coffee and we can maybe work on something.
Oh, okay.
Well, gosh, I don't have tons of juicy construction stories, but you did take me through a real fun house of a potential project yesterday, and we did not stumble over any decomposing bodies yesterday, but that was the big surprise to walk through a potential project with a gentleman that just
his number one tip was when his buddies get DUIs, they come do trade work for him. And it was all half done because they would get their licenses and then never come back.
Oh my gosh.
So
oh my gosh.
As we were stumbling around this construction site with our flashlights, because he's not going to keep the power on in a place like that. It would just encourage the squatters, I guess. And to see the efforts that have been made and the priorities he had made, it was just as if it were a bomb site with a new shower just framed in and installed. It was so wild to see the priority.
Kind of like somebody was doing like, oh, I'm going to teach my kid how to do construction. So we're just going to take this big empty building and like, we're going to put a shower in today. We're not going to do anything else. Just a shower. And it's not finished, but it's there. You can see it.
And it had been a bar and tavern. It had been a rooming house.
It was actually a problem bar that got shut down.
Interesting.
Yeah. Here's my story. And mine's actually good, you two. Jeez. So back in the early 2000s, Oprah was on TV. And I don't know if you remember, but she got really into finding child predators. She got really into finding people who had like skipped the registrations and were out and about, right? And so she had this one story I remember I saw. It was a maintenance man in an apartment complex. Like literally, like the story goes out, the people see the show and go, oh my gosh, that's Gary. Like he's been like having dinner in my apartment with me and my family because we're buddies because he's the apartment maintenance guy here. And I kind of in my mind went, like, oof, that would be a rough day. Because I'm a property manager.
Right.
How embarrassing for that manager.
I had a 300 unit community in Mechanicsburg at the time. And I just kind of was like, oof, wouldn't want to be on. And I remember like the cameras on Oprah like panned on the property sign, you know, like the inn at the Dove or Inn of the Hills or whatever. And it showed that and I was like, oh, that's bad press. Okay, so like the next week happens and I'm on my 300 unit property and we were building 80 new units on like 10 acres next to us. And the ground was just cleared. It was just a flat parcel of 10 acres, cleared, utilities run, conduit, no foundations yet. And so I'm running around and I run out and I come back to the property and in the road up to the property is no less than 10 unmarked police vehicles. And if you told me there were 10 in Mechanicsburg at that time, like unmarked police, I was like, what the heck? So we had this detective at the time at the department, and I don't know if he was sweet on me or what, but he would tell me stuff he should not tell me if I just called him on a cell phone. And I just called him up and I was like, you know, and I was a little sassy, you know, what the F is happening here? What do you have 10 unmarked in my community? Like, because when that stuff would happen, they were going to like kick in a door. Like kind of stuff like that had happened before. And so he goes, well, you know, that Oprah show, they're looking for this like child sex offender who's escaped, and we got a report that he's on your site. Again, though, there's no crews there that day. You can see it's just 10 acres of dirt with like little pipes. And I'm looking out my office window, and doesn't these 10 cars like just all go do a loop in a row and leave off the site? And I'm nervous, right? Because Gary or whoever the guy they're looking for might come on the conduit crew tomorrow. I don't know. I don't run that site. Then I found out they found him in another site. Thank goodness. But
Wow.
like on another project he was at for his company. And I just was like, oh, I could have had Oprah, like, you know, and of course the kids getting off the school bus right there and the whole thing. And that was my story of just like, try to sell 80 units when Oprah's against you, you know, in Mechanicsburg. Well, anyway, that's my wild story. Denny, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah.
I know that real estate investors might not be the ones to come to the SBDC, but real estate investors are entrepreneurial. They are people who take risks, who understand what it is to invest in themselves and their future. So they are likely to be entrepreneurial and need these services. What counties would the Bucknell SBDC serve, and how would a entrepreneur first get their foot in the door with you all?
Absolutely. So we serve Montour, Northumberland, Union, Snyder, Perry, Juniata counties. But there's an SBDC in every county in Pennsylvania. To find their location, they can just search Pennsylvania SBDC, PA SBDC, and it'll give you all the locations by county and which university serves, you know, that county. Simplest for Bucknell, you know, obviously call me.
Okay.
But real easy, bucknell.edu/SBDC. Click the button, request help.
Yeah. It's not fancy. It's not hard. It's not intimidating. Like I'll say, as like just a regular little small business person, you guys meet us where we are at. I can be a one man just starting my landscaping business, right? And you would help me.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Jesse, what would you like people to know today? Anything you want to plug?
Hold it with 𝐃𝐨𝐵. I heard it's really going to take the world by storm here momentarily. But
Okay.
One Focus Property Management, onefocus.pm.com for people who own or want to own small multifamily residential rentals or single family residential rentals, and they need help reducing their risk, helping them with tenants, helping them with their construction projects, and developing safe and secure residential rental housing in Clinton, Lycoming, Northumberland, Columbia, and Union counties, and kind of the surrounding area too. We just don't know when to stop. Or we can get you set up anywhere, really anywhere in the country with a recommendation for a responsible property manager in your area.
Oh, why would you want a responsible one?
Well, because we just don't like to have as much fun as the irresponsible ones, I guess.
Just real killjoys out there.
Yeah, just...
Okay, fair enough. Well, folks, I'm going to remind you that we need to keep doing as Wilson Phillips told us, and just to hold on for one more day. Don't you dare sell it. And come back next time.